The first stone struck her temple before the imperial carriage had even stopped moving. Blood slid down Seraphine Vale's cheek. The crowd cheered. Traitor, whore, monster. The words came from mouths that had once begged for her blessing. Farmers whose fields she had irrigated. Merchants whose trade routes she had protected. Nobles whose sons she had dragged alive from battlefields. Now they hurled rotten fruit, broken pottery, and fist-sized stones at the woman who had built half the empire with her own hands. Seraphine sat inside the iron cage fixed to the back of the carriage. Her wrists were chained. Her ankles were swollen. Her once silver ceremonial robes had been stripped away and replaced with coarse prison cloth. Beneath that cloth, her belly rose with the unmistakable curve of late pregnancy. A child moved inside her, a small kick. Weak, afraid. Seraphine lowered one hand as far as the chains allowed and covered her stomach. The movement only made the crowd laugh harder. Look at her protecting the bastard. Perhaps the Wasteland beast will eat them together. His Majesty is merciful. A blade would have been too quick. At the palace gate, banners of the House of Vale had already been torn down. In their place flew the golden phoenix of Emperor Cassian, her husband, the man who had once knelt before her in the snow and sworn that his crown would never rise higher than her heart. Now he stood above the gate in black imperial armor. Beside him was Lady Morelle, Seraphine's younger cousin. Morelle wore the moonstone necklace Seraphine's mother had left behind. She also wore Seraphine's title, Imperial Consort. Her slender fingers rested possessively on Cassian's arm. The Emperor gazed down at Seraphine as though she were filth trapped beneath his boot. Seraphine Vale, he announced, his voice amplified by court mages. You conspired with border generals, stole imperial grain, poisoned the royal bloodline, and attempted to seize the throne. Every accusation was absurd. Every witness had been purchased. Every document had been forged using Seraphine's own seal. She knew because she had discovered the plot 3 nights earlier. Too late. The guards she trusted had already been replaced. Her physicians had drugged her. Her personal maid had opened the chamber door. And Morelle had stood over her bed, smiling, while Cassian read the decree that destroyed her name. Seraphine looked at the man she had crowned. She remembered finding him years ago, a discarded prince bleeding beneath a bridge. She had hidden him from assassins, fed him, trained his men, spent the Vale treasury to buy his allies. When rebellion shattered the capital, it was Seraphine who rode through burning streets and cut down the regent's guards. Cassian had entered the throne room after the blood was already dry. Yet now he called her a traitor. Her lips parted. The crowd quieted, hungry for pleading. Cassian leaned forward. Perhaps he expected tears. Perhaps he wanted her to beg for the life of the child growing inside her. Seraphine only asked, "When did you decide?" Cassian's face stiffened. Morelle answered for him. "The moment you became inconvenient." Her voice was sweet, almost tender. She descended the gate stairs while soldiers forced a path through the mob. When she reached the cage, she raised one hand and touched the bars. "You were too capable, cousin. Too admired. The generals listened when you spoke. The ministers feared your silence. Even the commoners called you the true pillar of the empire." Morelle's smile widened. What man can sleep peacefully beside a woman who casts a larger shadow than his throne? Cassian said nothing. He did not need to. His silence was confession enough. Seraphine studied him, so that was it. Not love. Not betrayal born from temptation. Fear. A frightened man had mistaken the woman who carried him for the mountain blocking his son. The realization did not break her. It clarified everything. Morelle drew closer. And the child made matters worse. A son born from your blood would have inherited the loyalty of the Vale armies. His Majesty could not permit that. A murmur passed through the crowd. Cassian's jaw tightened. Morelle. She lowered her gaze obediently, but amusement flashed in her eyes. Seraphine felt another kick beneath her palm. Stronger this time. Her child was alive for now. "What will happen to my people?" Seraphine asked. Cassian looked relieved by the change of subject. "The Vale estates have been seized. Your officers will be investigated. Those proven innocent may retain their lives. Their lives, not their rank, not their families, not their freedom." Seraphine could already see the purges spreading. Generals executed, sold, villages burned for resisting new taxes. The empire she had strengthened would be gutted by parasites within a season. Morelle leaned toward the cage and whispered, "Your old nurse screamed your name when they dragged her away." The chain around Seraphine's wrist creaked, only once. A tiny sound, but Morelle stepped back. Cassian noticed. So did the nearest guards. For a heartbeat, the air turned cold. Then Seraphine smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was not even angry. It was the smile of someone who had finally counted every debt. Cassian's eyes narrowed. What are you smiling at? You, his expression darkened. Seraphine tilted her head. You always wanted to stand without my shadow. I am wondering how long you will remain standing after I leave. The crowd gasped. Cassian descended from the gate platform, fury twisting his face. He stopped beside the cage. You still believe yourself untouchable? No. Seraphine looked past him at the white towers, the golden roofs, and the crowded avenues she had saved from famine. I simply know which walls were built on my shoulders. Cassian seized the bars. You will die in the wasteland. Then pray I do. His fingers tightened. For the first time that day, fear flickered behind his eyes. He turned away sharply. Take her beyond the ashen boundary. Leave her with no provisions. The captain hesitated. Your Majesty, the wasteland storms are rising. Even mounted soldiers may not return before nightfall. Cassian did not look back, then ride faster. The carriage lurched forward. Stones followed Seraphine until the palace vanished behind smoke and towers. She did not close her eyes. She memorized every face, every banner, every guard insignia, every noble balcony from which someone watched her humiliation in silence. Pity was also a choice. Silence was also a blade. She would remember them all. The imperial road narrowed as the city gave way to dead farms. Green fields became gray soil. Gray soil became cracked earth. By sunset, even weeds had disappeared. The ashen wasteland stretched to the horizon beneath a blood-colored sky. Centuries earlier, forbidden magic had burned this region until rain itself refused to fall. Nothing grew here. Nothing ordinary lived here. The ground was salted with bone dust. The wind carried poisonous grit. At night, warped beasts crawled from ravines and hunted anything warm enough to bleed. The carriage stopped beside a broken stone marker. The captain unlocked the cage. Out Seraphine did not move. One soldier raised a whip. The captain caught his wrist. Do not. The younger man frowned. She is condemned. She is pregnant. She is a traitor. The captain's expression hardened. She was your commander at Red Hollow. You would be buried there if she had not held the pass. The soldier lowered the whip. Shame crossed his face, then vanished beneath obedience. Seraphine climbed down slowly. Pain tore through her lower back. Her knees nearly buckled. No one reached to help her. The captain removed her wrist chains, but left the iron collar around her neck. A suppressor collar. It sealed her mana and weakened her limbs. Cassian had considered everything, or believed he had. The captain placed a small water skin near her feet when the others were not looking. A crime punishable by death. Seraphine met his eyes. He looked away. The soldiers mounted. No farewell was spoken. Hooves pounded against the dead earth. Within moments, Seraphine stood alone. Wind dragged ash across her face. Darkness gathered fast. Far away, something howled. Another creature answered. She picked up the water skin. It was nearly empty. 3 mouthfuls at most. She drank none. Her child would need time, so would she. Seraphine walked toward a ridge of black stone. Every step stabbed through her swollen feet. The collar pulsed whenever she tried to summon mana. Heat burned beneath the metal. She ignored it. Pain was information, nothing more. By the time she reached the ridge, the sky had gone completely dark. 2 pale moons hung over the wasteland. Between them swirled a bruise-colored storm. Seraphine found a shallow crevice and lowered herself inside. The stone blocked some of the wind. Not enough. Her body trembled. Her fingers had turned blue. A scraping sound came from the darkness. Then another. Claws on rock. Seraphine reached for the hairpin hidden inside her braid. The guards had removed every weapon. They had missed the pin because it looked decorative. It was thin. Sharp enough for an eye, not enough for a pack. Yellow lights appeared beyond the crevice. 1 pair, then 4, then many more. Ash wolves. Their skin was hairless and cracked. Steam leaked from their jaws. They had no visible noses, only pits above rows of black teeth. The largest crept forward. Seraphine shifted her weight. Her belly tightened suddenly. A bolt of agony passed through her abdomen. She inhaled sharply. No, not now. Warm liquid spread beneath her prison cloth. The child was coming. The wolves smelled it. Their bodies lowered. Saliva struck the stone with a hiss. Seraphine pressed her back against the crevice wall. One hand held the hairpin. The other covered her stomach. Her breathing became slow, measured. The first wolf lunged. She twisted aside and drove the pin through its eye. The creature screamed. Its weight slammed into her shoulder. Bone cracked. Seraphine rolled beneath it as the second wolf snapped at her throat. Teeth tore through cloth and skin along her upper arm. She stabbed again. Missed. The third wolf seized her ankle. Pain exploded. Seraphine kicked its jaw with her free foot, but the suppressor collar drained what little strength remained. The largest wolf entered the crevice. Its jaws opened wide enough to crush her skull. Another contraction ripped through her. Her vision turned white. For the first time, fear touched her, not for herself. For the child, she had survived poison, war, betrayal, and public ruin. But her baby had not yet taken a first breath. It had committed no crime. It had harmed no one. Yet Cassian had condemned it to be born between the teeth of monsters. Something inside Seraphine broke. Not her courage, not her will. A seal deep within her soul, a locked door shuddered. She had felt it before. As a child in fevered dreams, a vast green field beneath the silver sun. A spring clear enough to reflect stars. An ancient voice calling her by a name no one else knew. Her mother had once warned her never to seek that place. The secret space belonged to the blood of the first empress. It could nourish nations, heal poisoned land, store armies beyond the reach of time. And if awakened by greed, it would devour its owner from within. Seraphine had dismissed the memories as dreams. Now the wolf's breath burned against her face. Blood ran down her arm. Her child twisted in distress. The locked door opened. A voice echoed through her mind. Bloodline confirmed. Hair confirmed. Sovereign space awakening. The wolf bit down. Seraphine vanished. Its jaws snapped shut on empty air. Silence fell. Then warm sunlight touched her skin. Seraphine opened her eyes. She lay on soft grass. Real green, wet with dew. Above her stretched a blue sky without clouds. A silver sun hung over distant mountains. A river wound through orchards heavy with fruit. Fields of golden grain swayed in a wind scented with herbs and rain. At the center of the valley stood a black palace surrounded by empty gardens. No servants moved along its steps. No guards watched its gates. Yet every stone seemed to recognize her. The suppressor collar cracked, then shattered. Mana flooded Seraphine's body. Not the thin current she had possessed before. This was an ocean, bottomless. Obedient, her wounds began to close, the bite on her arm sealed. The swelling in her ankle faded. Her broken shoulder shifted back into place with a sickening snap. Seraphine did not scream. A new contraction came. She pushed herself upright. Beside her, water bubbled from a spring lined with white jade. Instinct told her what it was. Life water. A single drop could revive dying soil. A cup could cleanse poison. She crawled to the spring, filled both hands, and drank. Warmth rushed through her veins. The pain in her belly eased. Her child's heartbeat steadied. Seraphine lowered herself beneath a flowering tree. Hours seemed to pass. Or perhaps minutes. Time moved differently here. The space sheltered her. The grass rose beneath her back like a bed. Branches bent to block the silver sun. The spring sent cool mist across her skin. Alone, abandoned, and covered in blood, the former empress gave birth without a physician, a midwife, or a single hand to hold. When the child finally cried, the entire valley answered. Bells rang inside the black palace. The river flashed gold. Thousands of dormant flowers opened at once. Seraphine lifted her daughter against her chest. A tiny, furious, dark hair clung to her head. Her eyes opened briefly. They were silver, the color of the first imperial bloodline. The color Cassian's dynasty had spent generations trying to erase. Seraphine wrapped the child in the clean inner layer of her ruined robe. She expected tears. None came. Her grief had burned too hot. It had become something purer, something useful. She looked toward the black palace. Its doors opened. Inside waited sealed libraries, armories, seed vaults, alchemical halls, and treasury chambers untouched for centuries. Beyond the orchards, empty fields stretched farther than the eye could see. The wasteland outside had been pronounced dead. But this place could reclaim it. It could grow food where armies starved, raise walls where invaders expected dust, hide soldiers, forge weapons, heal the poisoned, and perhaps one day swallow the empire that had cast her out. Seraphine touched her daughter's cheek. "They banished us to nothing," she whispered. The infant grasped her finger. Seraphine smiled coldly, patiently. "Then we will build everything." Outside the secret space, the ash wolves circled the empty crevice. Beyond them, the storm spread across the wasteland. Far away in the capital, Cassian raised a jeweled cup while Morel sat in Seraphine's throne. They believed the woman they feared was already dead. They believed the child had been erased. They believed the Vale bloodline had ended beneath a poisoned sky. Seraphine looked at the endless fertile land waiting for her command. She thought of the generals in chains, the servants dragged from their homes, the villages about to be stripped bare. She thought of Cassian's hand on the cage, Morel wearing her mother's necklace, the cheering crowd. Every debt remained clear. She would not rush back. She would not scream her innocence. She would not beg fools to recognize the truth. First, she would feed the wasteland. Then she would arm it. Then she would turn exiles into citizens, refugees into soldiers. and ruins into an empire no throne could threaten. Cassian had wanted her shadow gone, so she would give him sunlight, brilliant, merciless, hot enough to burn his kingdom to ash. Seraphine carried her daughter toward the open palace doors. Behind her, the fields bowed as though greeting their sovereign. Her banishment had ended. Her conquest had begun. Seraphine did not waste the first hour mourning. Grief was expensive. It consumed attention, weakened judgment, and gave dead enemies victories they had not earned. She laid her daughter inside a cradle of woven silver grass that formed itself beneath the flowering tree. The child slept immediately. Then Seraphine entered the Black Palace. The doors were tall enough for giants. They opened without sound. Inside, dark stone floors reflected the silver sunlight pouring through arched windows. Ancient banners hung from the ceiling, each embroidered with a crown wrapped in vines. Not the phoenix of Cassian's house, not the white wolf of Vale, a forgotten emblem, the sigil of the first sovereign. As Seraphine stepped across the threshold, pale characters appeared in the air. Sovereign recognized, bloodline authority restored, primary functions available, cultivation fields, live infinite storage, temporal chambers, territorial reclamation, legacy armory sealed, imperial archive partially sealed, guardian population dormant. Seraphine read each line once. No surprise crossed her face, no childish excitement. Power was only useful after its limits were measured. She walked through the palace methodically. The first hall contained shelves stacked with seeds, not sacks, not baskets, glass vessels, thousands of them. Each vessel held a different crop, herb, tree, or magical plant. Some glowed, some hissed softly. Some had roots that moved against the crystal like sleeping fingers. When Seraphine touched a vessel of black wheat, knowledge entered her mind. Ash grain grows in poisoned soil, feeds on corrupted mana, harvest cycle shortened within sovereign fields. Edible by humans after purification, can be refined into high-density military rations. She smiled. Cassian had banished her to a land where nothing grew. The space had handed her grain that devoured poison. The second hall contained tools, plows made of dark metal, axes that stone mills powered by mana, construction cores that could raise walls if fed minerals and bloodline authority. The third hall held empty storage chambers. The moment Seraphine entered, she understood their scale. Anything she touched outside could be transferred within. Food would not rot, water would not sour, weapons would not rust. Living beings could enter only by consent or when unconscious. That limitation mattered. She stored it away. The fourth hall was locked. Behind its doors, something enormous breathed. Guardian population dormant. Seraphine placed her hand against the seal. The palace showed her a demand. Territory reclaimed outside space required. Citizens recognized required. Sovereign merit required. She withdrew her hand. No shortcuts. Good. Power that demanded foundations was safer than power that offered miracles without cost. She returned to her daughter. The infant had woken. Her tiny face twisted before she released a furious cry. Seraphine sat beneath the tree and held her close. Milk came naturally. The life water had restored her body so completely that even the exhaustion of birth had vanished. While the child fed, Seraphine studied the edge of the secret space. A translucent view opened before her. The ash wolves still paced outside the crevice. Time had barely moved. Inside the space, hours had passed. The temporal difference was not fixed. She sensed that she could adjust it within certain limits. Enough to rest. Enough to train. Enough to grow crops faster than the outside world expected. Not enough to escape consequence forever. Again useful, again dangerous. Seraphine named her daughter Lyra. Not after an ancestor, not after a saint. Lyra was the name of a star sailors used when all familiar coastlines disappeared. A guide for those abandoned in darkness. When Lyra slept again, Seraphine left the space. She returned to the crevice with a short black spear taken from the palace tool hall. It was not one of the sealed legacy weapons. It was merely a harvesting spear. That was enough. The largest ash wolf lunged. Seraphine stepped aside. The suppressor collar was gone. Mana flowed freely through her limbs. She drove the spear through the beast's throat, twisted and tore upward. Black blood sprayed the stone. The remaining wolves froze. They had attacked a wounded pregnant prisoner. What stood before them now was neither wounded nor prey. Seraphine moved first. One thrust through an eye, one sweep beneath a jaw. One kick that broke a spine against the rock. The pack scattered. She allowed none to escape. Dead beasts could be studied. Living beasts carried warnings. The Wasteland did not need warnings yet. She touched the nearest carcass. All of them vanished into storage. The blood staining the rocks followed. Within breaths, the crevice appeared empty. Only shallow claw marks remained. Seraphine climbed the ridge and surveyed the horizon. The ashen wasteland was wider than many provinces. Cassian had called it worthless. That was why it was perfect. No spy tax collectors, no rival lords. No law except what survived. Far to the north, smoke rose in a thin line, not a storm. A settlement. Seraphine adjusted the torn cloth around her body, hid the spear inside the space, and began walking. She traveled until dawn. Whenever fatigue approached, she entered the space, drank from the spring, fed Lyra, and returned. To anyone watching, she would have seemed impossible. A woman fresh from childbirth crossing poisoned ground without food or shelter. By midday, she reached a village built from scrap wood, animal hide, and fragments of ancient ruins. A crude wall surrounded it. Heads hung from stakes beside the gate. Some belonged to beasts, some did not. Two guards raised crossbows. Stop, Seraphine stopped. Their armor was mismatched. One wore an imperial breastplate with the insignia scratched away. The other wore leather patched with metal scales. Name Seraphine, family, none. That answer tasted cleaner than expected. The guards looked at her stomach, then at the bundle in her arms. You gave birth recently. Yes. Where is your escort? Dead? Your husband? Worse. The leather-armored guard laughed. The other did not. He studied the faint marks around her wrists. Exile? Seraphine met his gaze. Yes. He lowered the crossbow slightly. Crime? Being useful to frighten people. This time, neither laughed. The gate opened. The village called itself Hollow Reed, though no reeds grew within 100 miles. The name was a memory from before the land died. Most residents were exiles, deserters, escaped slaves, criminals whose crimes ranged from murder to refusing a nobleman's bed. Children watched Seraphine pass with hollow eyes. Their ribs showed, their lips were cracked. A butcher's stall displayed strips of gray lizard meat covered in flies. Near the central well, 3 women fought over a clay cup of muddy water. No one intervened. A man in red robes stood atop a wagon, smiling as villagers gathered around him. Fresh delivery, he announced. Soldiers unloaded sacks marked with the imperial grain seal. Seraphine recognized the merchant immediately. Dorian Pell, a minor court supplier. He had once begged for a grain contract after his warehouses failed inspection. Seraphine had denied him because he mixed sawdust into flour. Mirel had later given him access to border markets. Now he sold imperial grain in the wasteland. At 5 times the legal price, a starving mother offered him a small silver ring. Dorian bid it. Impure. It belonged to my grandmother. Had cheap taste. My son has not eaten in 3 days. Dorian glanced at the boy beside her. He looks alive. Please, I could take the ring and give you half a cup. The woman nodded desperately. Dorian held out his hand. Seraphine spoke from behind the crowd. The grain is rotten, spread. Dorian turned. At first he did not recognize her, the prison cloth, the loose hair. The child in her arms, then his face changed, shock. Fear, calculation, he recovered quickly. Lady Seraphine. Dorian's smile widened. Or should I say former lady? Whispers erupted. The banished empress, the traitor, the poisoned consort. Rumors traveled faster than imperial horses. Dorian jumped down from the wagon. What a miracle. His Majesty said the wasteland would finish you before sunset. Seraphine looked at the sacks. You purchased spoiled military grain from the southern depots. His eyes narrowed. You have no authority here. The kernels were treated with bitterroot powder to hide mold. The dust darkens when exposed to water. Dorian laughed loudly. A desperate criminal inventing lies. He opened one sack and plunged his hand inside. Golden grain spilled between his fingers. Does this look rotten? Yes. The starving villagers leaned closer. Dorian's face hardened. Guards, 4 hired blades, moved toward Seraphine. She did not shift Lyra from her left arm. The first man reached for her shoulder. Seraphine caught his thumb and bent it backward until bone pierced skin. He screamed. She kicked the inside of his knee. The joint folded. The second drew a knife. She stepped inside his reach and struck his throat with 2 fingers. He collapsed, choking. The third hesitated. That saved his life. The fourth swung a club. Seraphine caught it, tore it from his grip, and smashed the grain sack open. Kernels poured across the ground. She took the clay cup from the starving mother and splashed muddy water over them. The grain darkened. Black veins spread through every kernel. A sour stench rose. The crowd recoiled. Dorian's face went pale. Seraphine crushed one kernel beneath her heel. Green mold, bitterroot masked the smell, she said. Heat awakens the toxin. Anyone who eats this will vomit blood before morning. The starving mother stared at Dorian. Others began checking the grain they had already bought. A man opened a sack and found the same black veins. Another screamed that his daughter had eaten porridge at dawn. Dorian backed toward his wagon. You think exposing a few bad sacks changes anything? Seraphine looked at him. It changes who the hungry blame. The crowd turned. Dorian saw murder in their eyes. He raised both hands. Listen, I am the only merchant willing to enter this place. Hurt me, and no grain caravan will return. The village chief pushed through the crowd. He was a broad man with one eye and a rusted sword. Then what do we eat? Dorian's confidence returned. Exactly. He pointed at Seraphine. She has given you anger. I give you food poison. Seraphine corrected. Food that might be poison is still more than she has. The crowd hesitated. Hunger was stronger than outrage. Dorian saw it. His smile returned. Lady Seraphine was always talented at speeches. Ask her where her armies are now. Ask where her estates are. Ask what she can offer besides a dead title and another starving mouth. Lyra stirred against Seraphine's chest. Dorian's gaze dropped to the child. Cruel amusement entered his eyes. Perhaps His Majesty was wise. A woman who cannot protect her own baby should not advise others. The village chief looked at Seraphine. What can you offer? She could have opened the secret space. She could have poured out enough fruit and grain to feed them for months. She did not. Trust purchased with miracles became greed. Greed without structure became betrayal. Seraphine looked at the poison sacks. I offer a trade. Dorian laughed. With what? Your life. His smile vanished. Seraphine addressed the village chief. Lock him inside his own wagon. Keep every sack. Do not eat the grain, and then I will leave before sunset. By tomorrow's sunset I will return with clean food. Dorian barked a laugh. From where? The wasteland. The villagers stared at her. The chief's single eye narrowed. Nothing grows here. Then you lose nothing by waiting. And if you do not return, take the merchant's horse. Ride east. His caravan guards have hidden emergency rations beneath the rear axle. Dorian spun toward the wagon. Too late. Two villagers were already searching. They found a sealed chest packed with fresh bread, dried meat, and clean water. The crowd exploded. Dorian tried to run. The chief struck him across the face with the rusted sword's flat. Bind him. As villagers dragged Dorian away, he shouted at Seraphine. You cannot grow food from ash. She watched. Her smile was small. But I can grow an empire from fools. Seraphine left Hollow Reed before the sun lowered. She walked beyond sight of the walls and entered the secret space. Inside, the fields waited. She selected ash grain, red root tubers, ironleaf cabbage, and white medicinal beans. Knowledge flowed into her mind. The sovereign fields did not require plowing by hand. They required command, intent, and resources from reclaimed land. Seraphine placed one palm against the soil. The carcasses of the ash wolves appeared beside her. She understood. Nothing wasted. Blood became fertilizer. Bone became mineral. Corrupted flesh became energy. The space stripped poison from each part and fed it into the fields. Seraphine planted the first seeds. The ground swallowed them. Silver light spread beneath the soil. Sprouts emerged within moments. She adjusted the temporal flow, hours outside, days within. The crops rose, thickened. Roots expanded. Pods formed. Seraphine harvested, replanted, and harvested again. She ground ash grain into flour. Tested the food on herself. Then on a captured wasteland beetle. Then on the injured ash wolf pup she found hidden beneath one carcass. It survived. It stopped trembling. It licked her hand. Seraphine named it Cinder and gave it no more affection than necessary. By the time the outside sun rose, she had enough clean food to feed Hollow Reed for weeks. But she did not bring all of it, only 3 wagons worth. Scarcity created discipline. Abundance without control invited thieves. She turned to the village leading Dorian's own horses. The wagons loaded beneath rough cloth. The gates opened slowly. Villagers gathered. Seraphine uncovered the first wagon. Black wheat, white beans, fresh cabbage. The smell alone made children cry. The chief lifted a handful of grain. Where? From land that answers to me. Dorian watched from inside a wooden cage. His face was swollen. His arrogance was gone. Impossible. Seraphine looked at him. Eat your own grain first. Then we can discuss impossible things. He began begging before she finished the sentence. The villagers laughed. Yesterday he had held their hunger like a chain. Now he pressed his face against wooden bars and promised gold, horses, contracts, anything to avoid the poison he had sold them. Seraphine turned away. She distributed food by household, not by coin. Every family received enough for 3 days. In return, every able adult owed labor. Wall repair, well cleaning, field preparation beyond the southern ridge. No charity, no idleness. No private hoarding. The chief listened carefully. You plan to stay? Seraphine looked beyond the wall at the dead horizon. For now. What are we? Not empress, not lady. Those names belonged to the capital that had spat on her. Seraphine looked down at Lyra sleeping peacefully against her chest. Sovereign will do. The chief stared. Then slowly he bowed. Others followed. Enough. Far away in the imperial capital, Mirel sat beside Cassian during the first council session held without Seraphine. The grain minister reported shortages in 3 provinces. The treasury minister blamed border instability. The generals argued over supply routes. Cassian demanded solutions. No one had any. The woman who had solved such problems before had been thrown into the wasteland. Mirel placed a hand on his sleeve. Do not worry. Dorian Pell has promised new shipments within the week. Cassian relaxed. He believed the merchant reliable. He did not know Dorian was caged beneath a dead sky. He did not know his spoiled grain had become proof. He did not know the first starving village had already begun whispering Seraphine's new title. And he did not know that the poisoned wasteland he had given her was slowly drinking light from beneath the soil. Deep under hollow reed, roots spread through ash. They consumed corruption. They carried life. By the next moon, green shoots would pierce the dead earth. By the next season, caravans would change direction. By the next war, hungry soldiers would discover which ruler truly controlled the food. Seraphine stood at the southern ridge and watched villagers break ground with tools from her secret space. Behind her, Lyra slept. Beside her, Cinder bared tiny black teeth at the horizon. Seraphine opened her palm. A single ash grain seed rested there, small, dark, unimpressive. Exactly the kind of thing arrogant people ignored. She closed her fingers around it. Cassian had taken her crown. Mirel had taken her title. The nobles had taken her estates. So Seraphine had given them what they wanted. An empty throne, a collapsing treasury, poisoned grain, and the privilege of ruling an empire that no longer knew how to feed itself. She had stepped aside now. She would grow in the dark. The first green shoot broke through the ash before dawn. A child found it. He screamed so loudly that Hollow Reed's guards thought a beast had breached the wall. By the time Seraphine arrived, half the village had gathered around the tiny blade of green trembling beneath the cold wind. No one touched it. No one dared. In the wasteland, green was more shocking than blood. The child who found it stood barefoot in the dirt, pointing with both hands. It grew. His mother covered her mouth. An old man dropped to his knees. Another villager whispered a prayer to a god who had ignored them for decades. Seraphine crouched beside the shoot, ash grain, healthy. Its roots had already spread deep beneath the poisoned soil, drinking corruption and returning clean manna to the earth. More sprouts pierced the ground around it. One, then another, then hundreds. A dark green tide rolled across the field. The villagers began crying, not quietly. They wept with the ugly, broken sounds of people who had forgotten what hope felt like. Seraphine watched without joining them. Hope was useful, but hope alone did not build walls. She rose. The villagers fell silent. Cut irrigation trenches before the sun rises. Fence the northern edge. Keep children away from the roots until the soil stabilizes. The village chief wiped his face. You can make all of it grow? Yes. How much? That answer killed the celebration. Good. The wasteland was not empty. Bandits watched smoke. Merchants followed rumor. Nobles followed profit. And once the capital learned that dead land had become fertile, Cassian would send soldiers beneath the banner of law. Seraphine would be ready. She divided Hollow Reed into work circles. Farmers handled planting. Former soldiers rebuilt the walls. Hunters mapped beast trails. Smiths dismantled Dorian's wagons and reforged every useful nail. Children gathered stones, ash wood, and bone fragments. Even the elderly had tasks. Sorting seed, grinding flour, weaving storage sacks. No one received food without contributing unless age, illness, or injury made work impossible. Those people received food first. The rule confused them. One thin woman asked why the useless were fed before the strong. Seraphine answered, because a society that discards the weak teaches everyone to betray it when they become weak. The woman lowered her head. Seraphine did not explain further. She did not speak of kindness. Kindness was too fragile. Structure survived. Within days, the village changed. The southern field became a black-green sea of ash grain. Red root vines spread beneath warm soil. White beans climbed new trellises. Ironleaf cabbage formed dense circles around the outer wall, its sharp-edged leaves repelling insects and small beasts. The well ran clear after Seraphine poured in a single cup of diluted life water. Fever disappeared. Children stopped coughing blood. Old wounds closed. The villagers began calling the change a blessing. Seraphine called it investment. Every healed worker strengthened the territory. Every fed child became future labor, future loyalty, future defense. Seeker responded, territory reclaimed. Citizens recognized. Sovereign merit increased. New function available. Construction domain. Seraphine entered the palace that night. A new chamber had opened. At its center floated a stone model of hollow reed. Every wall, every roof, every trench, every weak point, she touched the model. Knowledge unfolded. If she supplied stone, timber, metal, and mana, construction corps could reshape the settlement. Not instantly. Not without workers. The space did not replace effort, it multiplied it. That suited her. Miracles made people kneel. Shared labor made them belong. She selected the outer wall first. The next morning, she led teams into the western ruins. Collapsed towers jutted from the sand like broken teeth. Beneath them lay ancient blackstone, dense, mana-resistant, too heavy for ordinary wagons. Seraphine touched each slab and transferred it into storage. The villagers stared. She allowed them to see. Not everything, enough. A sovereign hiding every advantage invited doubt. A sovereign revealing every advantage invited assassination. Balance mattered. Back at Hollow Reed, the construction corps shaped the stone while masons guided them. Walls rose twice the height of the old palisade. Watchtowers formed at each corner. A gatehouse emerged from fused blackstone and ashwood. Beneath the village, storage chambers were carved into clean earth, grain silos, emergency shelters, hidden passages. Seraphine personally designed the final tunnel. It led beyond the eastern ridge to a concealed exit. No fortress was invincible. Only fools believed that. A wise ruler prepared for retreat before victory. Cinder grew quickly. The ash wolf pup no longer fit beneath Seraphine's arm. Its cracked skin healed into dark silver fur. Its eyes burned amber. Life water had purified the corruption without removing the beast's strength. It followed Lyra everywhere. When Lyra cried, Cinder growled at anyone nearby. When Lyra slept, it curled beneath her cradle. Seraphine tolerated this, barely. The Black Palace opened another sealed room when Hollow Reed's population swore formal allegiance. Inside waited 12 stone statues. Each depicted an armored figure with closed eyes. Guardian population dormant. The requirements had changed. Territory stable. Citizens loyal. Threat approaching. Seraphine looked at the final line. Threat approaching. The space sensed what scouts had not yet found. She left immediately. At the northern watchtower, she saw dust rising along the horizon. Riders many. The village chief joined her. Bandits. Seraphine counted the banners. 3 different symbols. A red hand. A skull wrapped in chain. Not one bandit group, she said. Then why travel together? Someone paid them. The chief's face tightened. Dorian? Seraphine looked toward the cage in the central yard. Dorian had grown thinner. He still lived because he knew trade routes, merchant contacts, and imperial supply habits. He had become useful. Useful people were not wasted. Yet he had managed to send no message, no bird. No rider. The buyer was elsewhere. Rumor alone had done the work. Fields in the wasteland meant food. Food meant wealth. Wealth meant violence. The bandits arrived by sunset. Their leader wore a coat stitched from human skin. He rode a horned wasteland elk and carried a curved sword across his back. Behind him marched nearly 200 raiders. Hollow Reed had fewer than 60 trained fighters. The bandit leader stopped beyond bow range. Open the gate. No one answered. He smiled. We know the traitor Empress is inside. Seraphine stepped onto the wall. The raiders laughed when they saw her. The leader raised his sword. Lady Seraphine. The capital says you are dead. The capital says many foolish things. More laughter. He pointed toward the fields. You have done impressive work, thank you. We will take the grain, the water, the tools, and the child. The village went silent. Seraphine's face did not change. The leader continued. The Emperor offers a private reward for proof that your bloodline ended. A small hand will be enough. Cinder's growl rolled across the wall. Seraphine rested one hand on the blackstone. Who gave you that offer? The leader grinned. You think I would tell you? No. She looked at the army behind him. I think your men will. His grin faded. He signaled. Raiders pushed forward 3 captives. Scouts from Hollow Reed. One was bleeding heavily. The leader placed his sword against the nearest captive's throat. Open the gate, or I kill them. The village chief cursed under his breath. Seraphine studied the captive. He was a former deserter named Rowan. He had joined Hollow Reed years ago after refusing an order to burn refugees. He met Seraphine's gaze. Then he shook his head. Do not open it. The leader pressed the blade harder. Blood ran down Rowan's neck. Seraphine spoke. Kill him. The bandit leader blinked. So did everyone on the wall. Rowan closed his eyes. The leader laughed uncertainly. You do not care? I care enough not to trade every life behind this wall for his. Rowan opened his eyes again. Relief crossed his face, not fear. Relief. The bandit leader's smile twisted. You are colder than the stories. The stories were written by people who lost. He cut Rowan's throat. A gasp tore through the village. Seraphine watched Rowan fall, her fingers pressed into the stone. Nothing else moved. The leader expected rage. He expected tears. He expected a reckless attack. She gave him none. Last chance, he shouted. Open the gate. Seraphine looked over her shoulder. Lower the field barriers. The chief stared. That will expose the crops, yes. He understood. A slow smile appeared. Workers pulled hidden levers. Stone channels opened around the outer fields. The raiders saw no danger, only grain. The leader raised his sword. Take everything. The bandit army charged. They crossed the first field. Then the ground collapsed. Ash grain roots had hollowed prepared trenches beneath a thin crust of soil. Dozens of riders plunged into pits lined with iron leaf spikes. Screams erupted. The second wave tried to turn. Seraphine activated the construction domain. Black stone pillars rose behind them. Their retreat closed. Archers on Hollow Reed's walls released burning arrows, not at the men. At the fields, the bandit leader laughed when the grain caught fire. Fools. You burned your own harvest. Then the smoke changed. Ash grain did not burn like ordinary wheat. Its stalks released purified mana when ignited. The smoke became silver. Raiders inhaled it, their bodies seized. Corrupted energy inside their blood reacted violently. Most wasteland bandits survived by eating tainted beasts and drinking poisoned water. The ash grain smoke dragged that poison to the surface. Men collapsed, clawing at black veins spreading beneath their skin. Hollow Reed's fighters fired again. This time, arrows struck throats, eyes, joints. The leader roared and charged alone toward the gate. His horned elk leaped over a trench. He reached the wall. The curved sword in his hands blazed red. One strike cracked Blackstone. He was stronger than expected. A high-ranked wasteland marauder. Perhaps once a military officer. He climbed the damaged wall with terrifying speed. Villagers backed away. Seraphine waited. He reached the top. His blade swung toward her neck. She raised one hand. The black harvesting spear appeared. Their weapons collided. The impact shattered nearby tiles. The leader's eyes widened. You still have mana. Seraphine pushed him back. He attacked again. Fast, heavy. Each strike carried enough force to split a man in half. Seraphine gave ground one step. Another. The raiders below cheered. The leader smiled. You are weaker than your reputation. Seraphine allowed her wrist to bend beneath his next blow. The spear fell. His smile widened. He raised his sword for the killing strike. Seraphine stepped inside his guard and drove 2 fingers into the wound beneath his ribs. A wound he had hidden beneath leather. His body locked. She had noticed it when he climbed. A slight protected side. A shallow breath. He had mistaken her retreat for weakness. It was measurement. She seized his wrist and turned. The curved blade entered his own thigh. He screamed. Seraphine took the sword. Then she cut both tendons behind his knees. He fell. The surviving raiders stopped fighting. Their leader knelt on the wall, unable to stand. Seraphine placed his own blade beneath his chin. Who paid you? He spat blood. Kill me. She pressed the blade upward. Eventually his face paled. Seraphine looked at the remaining raiders. Anyone who drops a weapon will receive water and a trial. The leader shouted, do not listen. The first sword hit the ground, then another. Within moments, dozens surrendered. The leader stared at them in disbelief. You cowards, one raider looked up at him. You brought us into a trap. Another shouted, you said the village was weak. A third pointed toward the dead. My brother trusted you. The bandits' loyalty collapsed instantly. False strength always did. Seraphine crouched beside their leader. Name. She pushed the blade deeper. Garen. Employer. A broker. Name. I never saw his face. Message seal? His eyes flickered. Enough. Seraphine searched his coat. Inside she found a strip of black silk stamped with a golden phoenix. Imperial material. Not official, private household stock. Cassian had no reason to hire wasteland bandits quietly. Muriel did. Seraphine folded the silk. The first blade had reached across the wasteland. Good. That meant Muriel was already afraid. The dead were buried outside the northern field. Rowan received a stone marker within the wall. The captured bandits were divided. Murderers and slavers were executed. Those guilty only of theft, desertion, or survival were offered labor under guard. More than half accepted. Hollow Reed's population grew. So did the secret space. Sovereign merit increased. Guardian awakening available. Seraphine entered the Black Palace and touched the 12 stone statues. Their eyes opened. Armor cracked. 12 figures stepped down. Not humans. Constructed guardians. Tall. Their bodies were forged from black stone and ancient silver. Each carried a different weapon. They knelt before Seraphine. "Command us, Sovereign." She sent 4 to protect Lyra, 4 to patrol the reclaimed fields, 4 to explore the western ruins. She did not display them publicly. Not yet. Fear worked best when uncertainty fed it. Weeks hollow reed became black reed hold. Its walls expanded. Its fields tripled. Caravans arrived secretly. At first they came for grain, then medicine, then purified water. Seraphine never sold cheap. She traded food for iron, tools, books, skilled workers, and information. Coin mattered less than capacity. A caravan master offered her a chest of gold. She refused it and took 6 experienced masons instead. A northern lord offered jewels. She demanded maps of abandoned mines. An exiled alchemist offered service in exchange for life water. Seraphine gave him diluted spring water and a laboratory under supervision. He produced healing salves within days. Every transaction strengthened Blackreed. Every visitor carried rumors outward. The banished empress had not died. She had built farms from poison. She healed incurable wounds. She commanded black walls that rose from the earth. She fed anyone willing to work. Refugees began arriving, families ruined by imperial taxes. Soldiers dismissed during Cassian's purges. Veil servants who had escaped execution. Seraphine recognized some. Her old cook fell to his knees at the gate. Her former librarian wept when she saw Lyra. A scarred cavalry officer named Elian brought 30 survivors from the Veil Guard. He knelt before Seraphine with his sword laid across both palms. "We failed you." "Yes," she said, his face tightened. She continued, "Do not fail twice." He bowed until his forehead touched stone. From that day, Blackreed had an army, small, disciplined, hungry for revenge. Seraphine trained them using manuals from the Imperial Archive. She equipped them with ash steel forged from purified beast bone and black ore. She fed them dense military rations. She drilled them at night beneath the silver lamps of the secret space. Outside, only weeks passed. Inside, months of training hardened them. Farmers became archers. Deserters became scouts. Former slaves became shield-bearers. The 12 guardians taught without mercy. Broken bones were healed with life water. Mistakes were corrected through pain. No one complained twice. Lyra grew slowly because Seraphine kept her outside the accelerated chambers. She would not steal her daughter's childhood for convenience. The child laughed often. Her silver eyes followed mana currents no one else could see. Flowers opened when she touched them. Cinder became large enough to carry her on its back. The sight terrified visitors. Seraphine found it efficient. Then the Western Guardians returned. They carried a sealed stone chest from beneath the ruins. Inside lay a crown, not gold, not jeweled. A simple band of black metal engraved with vines, the first sovereign's war crown. When Seraphine lifted it, the secret space trembled. The palace doors opened wider. The sealed armory unlocked. Rows of weapons appeared beyond darkness. Spears that drank magic. Bows that fired silent arrows. Armor grown from living metal. At the far end stood an empty throne. A voice echoed through the palace. Empire Foundation recognized. Course Nation available upon 3 territories reclaimed. Seraphine placed the crown back inside the chest. Not yet. A crown worn too early became a target. She needed more land. More people, more grain, more routes. Blackreed was only the beginning. Beyond the wasteland lay Frostgrave, a mining camp ruled by slavers. To the south stood Ember Basin, where refugees paid water tax to a warlord. To the east, the abandoned city of Vera sat above underground rivers. 3 territories. 3 chains waiting to be broken. 3 foundations for her empire. Meanwhile, Cassian sat inside a palace growing colder each day. The southern provinces had begun rationing grain. 2 generals had resigned. 1 treasury convoy had vanished. Merchants complained that wasteland caravans paid better than imperial markets. Morel dismissed the reports. The rumors are exaggerated. Cassian threw a ledger across the council table. Then why are our warehouses empty? No minister answered. The grain once managed by Seraphine had been sold, stolen, or spoiled. Dorian had disappeared. Border villages ignored imperial price orders. And someone was purchasing every useful craftsman along the eastern routes. Mirel touched the moonstone necklace at her throat. She cannot be responsible for all of this. Cassian looked at her. For the first time, doubt entered his face. Who else could be? Far away, Seraphine stood atop Blackreed's highest tower. Below her, green fields stretched across land once declared dead. Smoke rose from workshops. Children trained with wooden swords. Caravans waited at guarded gates. Soldiers marched beneath banners bearing the vine-wrapped crown. Behind the tower, hidden by Blackstone, Lyra slept beneath the protection of ancient guardians. Elian approached. Scouts returned from Frostgrave, and Seraphine looked north. Ember Basin? The warlord has doubled the water tax. Vera? Occupied by beasts. 3 problems. 3 opportunities. She turned from the horizon. Prepare the army. Elian's eyes sharpened. For which territory? Seraphine smiled. All of them. Cassian had believed she would crawl through the wasteland searching for survival. Mirel had believed hunger would erase her. The nobles had believed banishment was the end of her story. They were still drinking wine beneath golden roofs, still arguing over titles, still fighting for pieces of a decaying throne. They did not understand. Seraphine no longer wanted her place back. She was building something larger, something fed by the Empire's discarded people, something protected by walls the Imperial army could not break, something growing quietly beneath dead soil. And when Cassian finally looked east, he would not see an exile waiting to be forgiven. He would see a sovereign standing before an empire of her own. The empire's collapse began with rain. Black rain. It fell across the southern provinces for 3 days. The drops hissed against stone. Crops rotted before harvest. Livestock foamed at the mouth. Rivers turned thick and dark. Children woke screaming as black veins crawled beneath their skin. The court called it a temporary contamination. The priests called it divine punishment. The farmers called it death. Seraphine called it exactly what it was: the awakening of the buried corruption beneath the empire. For centuries, imperial mages had redirected poisoned mana away from the capital. They had pushed it east, into the wasteland, into the dead soil where no noble cared to look. The ashen wasteland had never been naturally barren. It had been the empire's graveyard. Every failed ritual, every cursed weapon, every alchemical disaster, every war spell too dangerous to contain, all of it had been buried beneath the land and forgotten. Now the pressure had reversed. Seraphine's ashgrain had purified vast stretches of the wasteland. The corruption could no longer spread east, so it surged back toward the empire. Mirel's stolen throne sat directly over the oldest imperial seal, and the seal was breaking. In the palace, Cassian stood before a window while black rain struck the glass. Below, the capital screamed. Citizens crowded the temple stairs. Soldiers sealed the markets. Merchants fought over barrels of clean water. The imperial fountains had turned red before dawn. Cassian gripped the window frame. How long until the purification array is restored? The court mage behind him lowered his head. The array requires moonstone conduits. Cassian turned. Then use them. They were removed from the eastern chambers. By whom? No one answered. Mirel stood beside the throne wearing Seraphine's moonstone necklace. The silence thickened. Cassian looked at her. Her hand rose slowly to the necklace. This cannot be enough to power an imperial array. The court mage swallowed. The necklace was the array's primary key. Mirel's face drained of color. She had taken it because it was beautiful, because it had belonged to Seraphine, because wearing it during the banishment had made victory taste sweeter. She had never asked why generations of Veil women wore the same stone. Cassian descended from the platform. Remove it. Mirel clutched the necklace. You cannot mean to strip me before the court. Remove it. Her fingers trembled as she opened the clasp. The moonstone had turned black. A crack ran through its center. The court mage recoiled. The key is corrupted. Cassian stared at Mirel. What did you do? She stepped back. Nothing. You wore it during blood rites. The succession ceremony required blood. Veil blood. The mage's voice broke. The array recognized Lady Seraphine's bloodline. It rejected yours. Mirel slapped him. You dare blame me? A minister stumbled inside. His robes were soaked. His skin had begun to blister. Your Majesty, the southern gate has fallen. Cassian's face hardened. To rebels? The minister shook his head. To the dead. The first corpses rose outside the capital before sunset. Farmers, soldiers, children. Anyone killed by the black rain returned with hollow eyes and mouths leaking smoke. They did not walk slowly. They ran. They climbed walls. They tore through armor with fingers hardened by corrupted mana. Imperial soldiers formed shield lines. The dead crashed into them. The lines broke in moments. The capital gates closed. Thousands remained outside. Cassian ordered the bridges raised. Mothers threw infants toward the walls. Men clawed at iron doors until their nails tore away. Archers fired into crowds to stop the panic. The dead reached them before nightfall. Inside the city, grain warehouses opened. They were nearly empty. The remaining sacks contained mold. Citizens stormed noble estates. Servants poisoned their masters. Guards abandoned their posts to protect their own families. The golden capital became a slaughterhouse before midnight. Mirel fled to her chambers. Her maids were already gone. Her jewelry boxes had been emptied. The gowns she had stolen from Seraphine lay trampled across the floor. She opened a hidden cabinet. Inside were dried meat, water, and gold. Cassian stood behind her. You prepared supplies. She froze. For us only enough for one. Mirel turned slowly. We can leave together. Cassian looked at the single traveling cloak. The single horse key. The single purification charm. Something inside him cracked. You knew. I suspected the court was unstable. You knew the city might fall. I was protecting the bloodline. You are not carrying my child. Mirel's expression changed, only slightly. Enough. Cassian seized her wrist. What have you done? She pulled away. The physician said I needed time. You told the council you were pregnant. I would have been. His hand struck her face. She fell against the bed. For years she had fed his fear. Seraphine was too powerful. Seraphine controlled the army. Seraphine's child would replace him. Seraphine planned to seize the throne. Every lie had been sweet because it excused his cowardice. Now the capital burned, and the woman beside him had prepared to escape alone. Outside, bells began ringing. Not temple bells, emergency bells. The western wall had fallen. Cassian stared at Mirel. For the first time, neither saw an ally, only a competitor for the last safe road. They drew blades at the same time. Far to the east, Blackreed's watchtower saw the sky turn black. Refugees came first, then soldiers, then nobles hiding beneath common cloaks. They carried stories of rivers filled with corpses and villages swallowed by storms. They begged for entry. Seraphine stood above the gate. Her empire had expanded far beyond Hollow Reed. Frostgrave's mines supplied iron. Ember Basin springs filled stone reservoirs. Veyra's underground rivers fed green terraces across the wasteland. 3 territories had sworn allegiance. The black war crown now rested on Seraphine's brow. Beneath her stood thousands. Former slaves, exiles, craftsmen, people the old empire had discarded. The refugees looked up at her. Some recognized her. Many had cheered when she was caged. One nobleman pushed through the crowd. Lady Seraphine. She looked down. He had watched from a palace balcony during her banishment. He had lifted a wine cup when the first stone struck her. Now his silk robes were torn. His feet were bleeding. Open the gate, he demanded. I am Duke Halvern. Seraphine said nothing. He raised his chin. My family has served the throne for generations. Then returned to it. His arrogance cracked. The capital is lost. So is your title. He stared at her. Behind him, the dead appeared along the horizon. A dark mass moving through the storm. The refugees began screaming. Duke Halvern dropped to his knees. Please. Seraphine watched him bow. Entry requires surrender. I surrender. Your land. Yes. Your wealth. Yes. Your household guards. His face tightened. They are loyal to me. The dead drew closer. Halvern turned and saw them. He pressed his forehead into the ash. They are yours. Seraphine raised one hand. The gate opened. Soldiers searched every refugee. Weapons were seized. Nobles and commoners received the same bread, the same water, the same place in the labor lines. Those who resisted were left outside. Most learned humility quickly. The dead reached Blackreed before dawn. They filled the plain. Tens of thousands. Perhaps more. Former Imperial soldiers still wore rusted armor. Corrupted beasts crawled among them. At the center moved something enormous. A giant formed from fused corpses. Its shoulders rose above the walls. Faces stretched across its body. Some still whispered, some begged. Some laughed. The refugees collapsed in terror. Imperial veterans dropped their weapons. Priests began praying. Seraphine descended from the tower. Elian followed. Your Majesty, the outer fields will not survive. They do not need to. The enemy number is impossible. No. Seraphine looked toward the Black Palace hidden within her secret space. The number is sufficient. She opened the gates. The defenders stared. Elian did not question her. He raised his sword formation. Blackreed's army marched outside. Not many. Enough. They wore living metal armor from the Legacy Armory. Ash steel spears rested against their shoulders. Wasteland wolves moved beside cavalry. Above them flew dark birds bred within the sovereign fields, each carrying sealed firestones. The Imperial refugees watched in silence. They had expected hungry exiles with crude weapons. Instead, they saw ranks more disciplined than the royal guard. The dead charged. Seraphine raised the war crown's command seal. The 12 ancient guardians stepped through the gate. Then more followed. The Black Palace had awakened fully after the third territory was reclaimed. Dozens. Hundreds. An army of stone and silver. They formed a wall before the living. The dead struck. The sound shook the wasteland. Guardians crushed corrupted bodies beneath shields. Ash steel spears released purification light. Dark birds dropped firestones into the horde. Silver flames spread without touching living flesh. Every corpse they burned collapsed into clean ash. Still the giant came. It tore guardians apart. It swallowed fire. Its many mouths screamed with the voices of the dead. The refugees fled from the wall. Seraphine walked toward it, alone. Elian called after her. She did not stop. The giant raised one arm. Its shadow covered her. Morel's spies hidden among the refugees watched eagerly. This was their final hope. If Seraphine died, Blackreed would fracture. If the monster crushed her, the old empire might still reclaim the wasteland. The giant brought its fist down. Seraphine lifted the harvesting spear. The same simple weapon she had used against ash wolves, the same unimpressive black shaft Dorian had mocked. The ground exploded. Dust swallowed everything. A shockwave struck the walls. Refugees fell. Soldiers shielded their faces. For a heartbeat no one could see. Then the dust cleared. Seraphine remained standing. The giant's fist had stopped above her. A thin line of silver light ran through its arm. Then another. Then thousands. The entire creature split apart. Not slowly, not piece by piece, all at once. The fused mountain of corpses collapsed into a storm of clean white ash. The horde behind it stopped. Seraphine drove the spear into the ground. The sovereign fields answered. Ashgrain roots erupted across the plain. They wrapped around every corpse. Purification light spread from body to body. The darkness vanished like ink beneath fire. Within breaths, the entire army of dead fell. Silence covered the wasteland. No battle cry followed, no cheer. The witnesses had forgotten how to breathe. Duke Halvern stared from the wall. His mouth hung open. A former Imperial commander dropped to both knees. One priest began laughing and sobbing at the same time. The hidden spies tried to flee. Cinder blocked their path. Its jaws dripped silver fire. Seraphine turned toward the walls. Her army knelt. Then the refugees followed. Thousands lowered their heads. Not from law, not from ceremony, from terror. From awe. From the unbearable realization that the woman they had mocked, condemned, and abandoned now held power beyond anything their golden throne had possessed. Seraphine looked west, toward the dying capital. She knew Cassian was still alive. Cowards often survived longer than brave men. She knew Morel would run. Rats always searched for higher ground when the cellar flooded. Good. Let them come. Let them cross the poisoned roads. Let them see green fields guarded by people they once called worthless. Let them stand before black walls they could never breach. Let them remember the pregnant woman left beneath a dead sky with an empty water skin. Seraphine lifted her spear. Prepare the western road. Elian rose. For invasion, for guests. Her smile was colder than the black rain. The Emperor has lost his empire. She turned toward her kneeling citizens. Now he will come begging for mine. Cassian reached the western road with one boot missing. The Emperor of the Golden Capital limped through mud beneath a sky that no longer recognized him. His black armor was cracked. His cloak had been torn into strips. Blood dried along his jaw. Behind him walked fewer than 20 survivors. No horses. No royal guard. Only frightened men carrying empty scabbards in the memory of a city devouring itself. Mirelle walked among them. Her hair hung loose around her face. The moonstone necklace was gone. The jewels sewn into her sleeves had been cut out during the flight. A long wound crossed one cheek where Cassian's blade had nearly opened her throat. She watched his back with hatred. He watched her shadow with the same. Neither slept deeply. Neither ate without forcing someone else to taste first. Their empire had ended before the capital gates disappeared behind smoke. They simply had not admitted it yet. The western road led through villages Cassian had once taxed. Now every gate closed when he approached. At the first village, he announced his name. The villagers threw stones. At the second, he demanded food under imperial law. An old woman spat at his feet. At the third, his surviving soldiers tried to seize a horse. The owner's sons killed 2 of them with farming tools. Cassian ordered the village burned. No one obeyed. His men looked at him, then at the dark horizon. Then at the green fields spreading east. They walked away one by one. By the time Blackreed's outer towers appeared, only 6 remained. Mirelle laughed when she saw the walls. Not because anything was amusing. Her mind had begun to fracture beneath hunger. Blackstone rose from the reclaimed plain like the spine of some ancient beast. Watchtowers burned with silver flame. Fields stretched farther than sight. Ash grain moved beneath the wind in dark waves. Workers walked between irrigation channels carrying baskets of vegetables. Children laughed beside clear water. Refugees trained with spears beneath disciplined instructors. Everything the capital had lost existed here in greater abundance. Cassian stopped. His mouth opened. No sound came. Mirelle stared at the terraces. No, she shook her head. No, she could not have built this. A patrol approached. Armored riders mounted purified wasteland wolves. Their leader was Elian. Once Cassian had ordered him arrested for excessive loyalty to House Vale. Elian now wore black living armor marked with the vine-wrapped crown. He looked down at Cassian without surprise. State your purpose. Cassian straightened. Habit returned before dignity. I am Emperor Cassian. Elian's expression did not change. You were? One of the surviving guards reached for his sword. A wolf growled. The guard lowered his hand. Cassian's face flushed. I demand an audience with Seraphine. Sovereign Seraphine, she is my wife. Mirel laughed again. This time even the guards looked at her with disgust. Elian turned his mount. Follow. They were not permitted through the main gate. They entered through the refugee passage. There, soldiers searched them. Cassian's blade was taken. Mirel's hidden knife was found beneath her sleeve. Her purification charm was removed. Her final gold ring was placed in a sealed box. She fought when a female guard touched her hair. The guard struck her once. Mirel fell. No one apologized. Cassian watched. Once he would have ordered an execution for such an insult. Now he looked away. They were given plain clothing and led to the public square. The journey through Blackreed was worse than any dungeon. People recognized them, former palace servants, dismissed officers, farmers ruined by imperial grain seizures, children whose parents had died during noble purges. No one bowed. No one stepped aside. Silence followed Cassian through the streets. Not respectful silence, judgment. A scarred woman held her son close as he passed. A blacksmith stopped hammering and stared. An old Vale soldier removed his hat. Then he spat into the road. Mirel tried to hide behind Cassian. He moved away from her. The square opened before the Black Palace. Seraphine sat beneath a canopy of living vines. The war crown rested on her dark hair. Her clothing was simple. Black silver, no excessive jewels. No golden throne. She sat in a carved stone chair with Lyra asleep against her chest. Cinder lay at her feet. The great wolf opened amber eyes when Cassian approached. Ancient guardians stood behind Seraphine. Elian stopped before the steps. The former emperor requests an audience. Cassian flinched at the title. Seraphine looked at him. That was all. No anger, no triumph, no visible satisfaction. Her gaze passed across his torn clothing, bruised face, and bleeding foot as though examining damaged cargo. Cassian fell to one knee, not from respect. His leg could no longer support him. Seraphine Cinder stood. A low growl rolled through the square. Cassian corrected himself. Sovereign Seraphine, the wolf settled. Mirel remained standing. Her lips trembled. She looked at Lyra. The child was healthy, clean, wrapped in soft silver cloth. The sight struck Mirel harder than starvation. She had imagined the baby dead. She had needed the baby to be dead. The child's survival transformed every cruel word she had spoken into evidence of failure. Seraphine touched Lyra's back gently. You want, Cassian swallowed. Sanctuary. No, the answer came before hope could form. Cassian lifted his head. You have not heard my terms. You possess nothing. I still have loyalists. 6 men entered with you. 4 asked to remain in the refugee quarter before reaching this square. Cassian turned. Only 2 guards stood behind him. Neither met his eyes. He faced Seraphine again. The western provinces may still recognize me. They have declared independence. The northern armies swore allegiance to their local commanders. The treasury reserves burned with the palace. Each answer was delivered calmly. Each one removed another wall from the illusion, holding him upright. Mirel stepped forward. Cousin. Seraphine looked at her. Mirel's expression softened instantly. The transformation was almost impressive. Tears gathered, shook. I was wrong. Seraphine said nothing. Mirel fell to her knees. I was jealous, I admit it. You were beautiful, powerful, loved by everyone. I spent my whole life standing behind you. She crawled closer. The guards lowered spears. Mirel stopped. I only wanted to be seen. Seraphine's gaze remained empty. Mirel pressed both palms against the stone. We are family. A few people in the square laughed bitterly. Mirel raised her voice. Our mothers were sisters. We grew up beneath the same roof. You braided my hair. You held me when I was afraid of storms. I remember. Hope flashed across Mirel's face. Seraphine continued. I also remember what you whispered beside my cage. Mirel froze. The square grew quiet. Seraphine's voice did not rise. Your old nurse screamed your name when they dragged her away. Mirel's face collapsed. Seraphine repeated the words exactly as Mirel had spoken them. Same gentle rhythm. Do you remember smiling? Mirel began shaking. I was angry. No. Seraphine tilted her head. You were happy. I did not mean. You wore my mother's necklace. Mirel's hand flew to her empty throat. You told Cassian my child would threaten his crown. I was manipulated. By whom? Mirel looked at Cassian. He stared back. The last thread between them snapped. By him, she said. Cassian surged to his feet. Liar. Mirel pointed at him. He planned everything. He feared you. He ordered the false witnesses. He signed the exile decree. You forged the reports. Because you told me she would kill us. You poisoned her physician. You paid me. Their voices rose. They began exposing each other without restraint. Secret bribance. Stolen grain. Murdered ministers. Every accusation dragged another crime into daylight. The crowd listened. Seraphine stroked Lyra's hair. When Cassian lunged for Mirel, Elian struck him behind the knee. He fell beside her. Seraphine waited until both were breathing hard. Finished? Neither answered. Good. Cassian looked up. His face had lost its royal mask. He was only a tired man terrified of death. I loved you. The square reacted with disgust. Seraphine's expression did not change. Cassian crawled toward the first step. I did. Once. Before the crown changed everything. The crown changed nothing. It revealed you. His eyes filled. You do not understand what it was like. Seraphine almost smiled. Explain. Every room became silent when you entered. Generals asked for your judgment before mine. Ministers waited for you to approve my decisions. The people painted your face on shrine walls. He struck his own chester. You were insecure. I was invisible beside you. You were alive because of me. His mouth closed. Seraphine leaned back. I found you beneath a bridge. Cassian's face twitched. You were bleeding into frozen mud. You had no soldiers. No allies. No fee spoke. As though reading a ledger, I hid you. Fed you. Purchased your first armor. Bribed the guard captain who opened the eastern gate. Sent veil riders into the capital. Buried men who died carrying your banner. Cassian's tears fell. Seraphine continued. You promised my nurse protection. He lowered his head. You promised my officer's honor. His shoulders shook. You promised our child a peaceful empire. I was afraid. So was I. Her voice hardened for the first time. I was pregnant, drugged, chained, bleeding, surrounded by a crowd calling my child a bastard. Cassian pressed his forehead against the stone. Forgive me. I will serve you. No, I will renounce every claim. You have no claim. He lifted both hands. Then let me live as a common man. Seraphine studied him. Cassian mistook the silence for consideration. He crawled higher. I can work. I can prove myself. I can stand. He obeyed immediately. Hope made him clumsy. Guards pulled him upright. Seraphine looked at Mirel. You too. Mirel rose slowly. Seraphine signaled. Two servants brought a small table. On it stood a crystal decanter filled with red wine, 2 cups and 2 bowls of grain. Cassian stared. Mirel began to cry before anything was explained. Seraphine poured herself wine. She drank slowly, exactly as she had imagined while laboring alone beneath the flowering tree. Cassian watched the cup touch her lips. His breathing became uneven. Seraphine gestured toward the bowls. Inside lay golden kernels. Spoiled imperial grain. The same stock Dorian had sold in hollow reed. The same grain Cassian's ministers had allowed merchants to distribute. Mold hid beneath bitterroot dust. Mirel shook her head. No. Seraphine turned the wine cup between her fingers. Cassian whispered, It is poisoned. Yes. His knees weakened. Seraphine looked at him. Food that might be poison is still more than she has. Dorian's old words passed through the square. Several villagers remembered. A murmur spread. Seraphine's eyes remained on Cassian. How many citizens ate this while your court held banquets? I did not know. You chose not to know. Cassian stared into the bowl. Mirel backed away. A guardian blocked her. She screamed, You cannot do this. Seraphine raised one brow. Mirel's voice cracked. I am your family. Seraphine, you became inconvenient. Mirel covered her ears. No. Seraphine's tone stayed gentle. Those were your words. I was cruel. Yes, I regret them. Because they returned to you. Mirel collapsed. She clutched Seraphine's robe at the first step. The nearest guard moved, but Seraphine stopped him. Mirel pressed her face against the fabric. I will give you anything. You already did. She looked up. Your betrayal gave me distance. Your theft gave me clarity. Your exile gave me land. Seraphine glanced across Blackreed. You were more useful as an enemy than you ever were as family. Mirel released the robe. Something in her eyes died. Cassian reached for the bowl. His hand shook so violently that kernels spilled across the table. He placed one in his mouth, chewed, swallowed. Mirel stared at him. Coward, he seized her bowl and forced it toward her. If I die, you die. She clawed his face. He struck her. They fell against the table. Bowls shattered. Grain scattered across the stone. Cassian grabbed handfuls and shoved them into Mirel's mouth. She bit his fingers. Blood sprayed. The crowd watched without moving. There was no dignity left to strip away. Only appetite, fear. The true foundations of their partnership. Seraphine finished her wine. Enough. Guardians separated them. Both were dragged upright. Mold stained their lips. Cassian began vomiting first. Mirel followed. Black veins spread along their throats. They begged between convulsions. Not for each other. For themselves, always themselves. Seraphine carried Lyra down the steps. She stopped before Cassian. He reached toward the child. Cinder's jaws closed around his wrist without biting through. Cassian screamed. Seraphine looked at the man who had condemned his own daughter. You wanted proof that my bloodline ended. His face twisted. No, she shifted Lyra slightly. The child opened silver eyes. Cassian stared. For one heartbeat, wonder overcame terror. Then Seraphine stepped away. That is the closest you will ever come to her. He sobbed. Mirel clawed at the stones. Please do not leave us alone. Seraphine looked back. You left me alone. The guardians dragged Cassian and Mirel beyond the western gate, not into a dungeon, not onto an execution platform, into the same wasteland where Seraphine had been abandoned. They received no provisions, no weapons, no escort, only the clothes on their bodies and poison moving through their blood. The gates closed behind them. Cassian beat against Blackstone until his fists broke. Mirel crawled east, searching for water. She found none. Night came, ash beasts howled. Cassian tried to follow her. His legs failed. They spent their final hours blaming each other beneath the poisoned sky. Mirel died first. Alone despite Cassian lying only a few steps away, he heard the beasts reach her. He lacked the strength to turn his head. Near dawn, he saw green fields beyond Blackreed's walls. Warm lights burned in windows. Citizens began another peaceful day. The Empire continued. Only without him. Cassian whispered Seraphine's name until his voice disappeared. No one answered. When the sun rose, the former emperor died staring at the walls built by the woman he had discarded. Blackreed's scouts found the bodies later. Seraphine ordered no monuments, no royal burial, no display. Their bones were placed with other Wasteland dead. Anonymous equal. Forgotten, years passed, green territory spread westward. The dead capital was purified and rebuilt. But Seraphine never restored the Golden Palace. She turned its foundations into a public granary. The old throne room became a school. The prison where Vale servants had been tortured became a hospital. No phoenix banner flew again. Across the reclaimed empire, dark flags carried the vine-wrapped crown. Lyra grew beneath silver sunlight and open skies. She learned law from exiles, strategy from soldiers, agriculture from farmers, mercy from those who had survived cruelty, ruthlessness from her mother. When foreign rulers asked how Seraphine had conquered an empire without first raising an army, she gave no grand speech. She looked across fields that had once been ash, at citizens who had once been discarded, at walls built by hands the old empire had called useless. Then she smiled cold, quiet, final. I did not reclaim what they stole. She rested one hand upon the black war crown. I made their theft irrelevant.